And before we begin, I would like to go over a few guidelines to help us navigate this system as efficiently and respectfully as possible. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. The moderator for tonight is City Clerk Elisa Tinti, and she reserves the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Council members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a council member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands, and I will call members. I will call on members by stating their name clearly for our audio listeners. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions will be available to the public on the city's website. Although we will not have public speaking tonight, you can sign up to speak at our monthly council meeting. Please email Elisa Tinti to sign up by noon the day of the meeting, or you can submit comment for the record by the same deadline. The email address is emtinti@kingston-ny.gov. You can also drop comments off at the drop box located outside the side door of City Hall. We also encourage you to reach out to committee chairs and your ward's representative at any time. City Clerk Elisa Tinti is the moderator for tonight's meeting. She has the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. Lastly, for tonight's meeting, we have in attendance myself, Jeffrey Ventura Morel, Chair, committee members, Alderwoman Rita Worthington, Alderman Patrick O'Reilly, Alderman Don Tollerman, and Alderman Rennie Scott Childress. Non-voting committee member, Alderwoman Michelle Hirsch, and city staff, Elisa Tinti, and Corp Counsel, Dan Gartenstein. Thank you for your patience during these difficult times, and on behalf of the Common Council, I wish you and your family good health. I will now call this meeting to order at 6:38 p.m. Okay, so we have a few old business items to take care of that were referred to the several city and county agencies, and we've gotten back comments. The first one is the livestock issue. If you remember, we are taking that out of the purview of the zoning enforcement officer and putting it into the animal into the chapter 151 of the animal code. So the next step for that, we've received comments. The deadline to receive did we receive comments from everybody, Elisa? Elisa?
No, we did not. There was a little holdup with the Ulster County Planning Board. They, I had mailed out the resolutions. Well, I mailed out the referrals quite a while ago so that they would have them in advance. They received them and spoke to Dan Gartenstein about them. And then on the 13th of November, I sent out the resolutions, but no one knows what happened to them because they, from what I understand, they said they did not receive them. So I sent them electronically today. I had initially sent them in the mail. Their referral form states in bold letters that they want things to be hand delivered or mailed. They don't want things to be scanned. So I had mailed them. So they now have them, and it's my understanding that the Ulster County Planning Board will be reviewing that in January. I did speak to Dan Gartenstein, and he advises that that does not hold up the process of having a public hearing, that we can, in fact, schedule that tonight.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. This is, we have 3 public hearings to schedule for next month before the next Laws and Rules meeting. So I'll read out the dates that are available, and let me know if you have a conflict with any of those dates or if there's a preference. I'd like, for the last one, the zoning, I would like to schedule that before, well in advance of the laws and rules meeting, so we have time to get any questions answered, so that we can move forward with it at the next meeting. But the other two, we could either do them on January 20th, right before the laws and rules meeting. We have free between 5:30 and 6:30 of that day. So I think we can schedule two. Is there a conflict if we schedule two public hearings on the same day and schedule them for half an hour each, Elisa?
No, as long as you have the proper notification for the paper, that should be fine.
Okay. So would everybody be okay doing this one at 5:30 on the day of the laws and rules meeting? Patrick? Well, we don't need a quorum.
That's fine, Jeffrey.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this one will be, so the public hearing for the livestock would be on January 20th from 5:30 to 6. And then the next agenda item would be the temp use variance that was also on our October, or was it October agenda? And it was referred out to the interested agencies for comment. I see here we have responses from the planning board and the HLPC. Is that a similar issue with the Ulster County Planning Board, Elisa?
Yes, they were all sent in one packet.
Okay. All right, no problem. So, so we can schedule this public hearing for the same day, January 20th, from 6 to 6:30. Is that okay? Thank you. It'll be a long day that day. Hopefully not too many comments. And then, so the last old business item is one we've been talking about for quite a while. It's the affordable housing zoning code. We received comments back from everyone that it was referred to. The next step will be to schedule a public hearing. But I know some of you had questions last time about the comments from the Ulster County Planning Board, and it was suggested that we invite somebody from that agency to answer any questions that anyone might have. So I've asked Dennis Doyle to join us today. Dennis Doyle from the County Planning Board. I see him on. Dennis, are you on?
I'm just trying to unmute him. Give me a second. My computer is slow.
Oh,
there he goes.
Yes, I am. Sorry about that.
Remind us which
Dennis,
page.
how are you?
Yep. Hi, Dennis.
Hi.
Rennie, you're muted.
Jeffrey, can you remind us which page the that recommendation is on in our packet here?
Sure. That would be on. So I have it on print, and let me just look at it online because I don't have page numbers on my print version. That is on page, starting on page 13. On the online version.
I'm sorry, I'm asking where the county recommendation itself is, because it seems to be way down there somewhere. Anyway, I'll
Yeah,
keep
that-
looking.
Oh, that would be, hold on just a second. Page 7 of on the agenda packet.
No, I think it's page 41. That's where the actual Ulster County Planning Board recommendation is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, I clicked on it. So yeah, if you're on the full agenda packet, sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Thank you. Right. Any questions? Okay, I'll start. I have one question. I've heard, Dennis, I've heard some concern that that doing this requirement infringes on people's property rights, and I wonder if you can comment on that. I know there's already a precedent on the county. New Paltz has something similar, so.
Sure. A couple of things with respect to that. One is that what the Kingston is proposing is well known in zoning and planning circles. It's called inclusionary zoning, and inclusionary zoning has been accepted by the courts repeatedly in terms of a requirement to have a certain percentage of new construction be considered to be affordable. The town of New Paltz, the village of New Paltz has it. The town of Lloyd has it. I believe the town of Marlborough has it. Marlborough has a similar situation. And there are entire states that essentially provide for inclusionary zoning in some form or the other. New Jersey, as a state, has inclusionary zoning. Westchester, as a county, has moved towards inclusionary zoning, et cetera. So there's at least a lot of individual municipalities that you can point to that have inclusionary zoning where a portion of new construction is required to be affordable.
Okay, thank you. And I know the 10% in many other places I've seen that this 10% is sort of a common number. Do you know? It's been suggested that maybe our number is not high enough. Do you know why the 10% was arrived at? Is there?
Well, I mean, it's your statute. I mean, we didn't comment. If you look at the county planning board's comment back, we didn't comment on 10%. I can tell you that other communities, the county do use a 10% requirement. We have not seen anything. Let me think about that. I don't recall seeing anything within Ulster County that's higher than 10%. Once you get to 20% affordable, there's a provision in real property tax law that basically allows the assessor to assess a property based on its income, not on if it's controlled essentially by an entity or an agency or its funding source that allows the assessor. Actually, it requires the assessor to assess the property based on its income versus on the value of the building. So 10% is not something that we commented on as a board. It's not something that's an unusual requirement. I think it's up to the community to decide whether it's enough or not. We did comment in our referral that since we began looking at inclusionary zoning, that the city has built somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 multifamily housing units, and looking at that, that's about 30 units at a 10% level. So if you think about that, it's not a panacea to the housing problems within the city, but it's a great start.
Thank you. Yes, Alderman Scott Childress.
I have a couple of questions, kind of in different areas. Dennis, thank you for being here tonight, first of all, and hope you don't have to ski tomorrow. And my first question has to do with critics of this form of development of affordable housing suggest that it can dampen to some degree developer interest in creating new developments, or otherwise, in a sense, alter the kinds of developments that are presented? Do you have any opinion one way or the other on that?
Well, the requirement's not new to the city. It's had some of these requirements in the past. It was just confined to a single district, the mixed-use overlay district. And when you look at the comments that we had, one of the things that we would suggest is you want to make sure that one of the things you don't want to do is make sure that the development process is financially unfeasible by the requirement. That's certainly one of the things that can be problematic. So when you look at the comments that we made, one of the comments that we made back to the board, which was an advisory comment, was consideration of density bonuses. So you end up essentially like the mixed use overlay used to do. It granted a density bonus, or it granted a change in the way the zoning was anticipated. So you start to think about that as a density bonus, so that you can make the project affordable, or you make the project financially doable. So that's one of the things that you can consider as you look at adopting this ordinance citywide, and we mentioned that to you as in part of our response. I would say that in the only thing that we've seen on the homeownership side, where we've seen changes with respect to inclusionary zoning, particularly when they're set to a given number of units. For example, the inclusionary provision doesn't kick in until there's 10 units or more, or 10. You'll start to see developers play with the idea of a 9-unit subdivision rather than a 10-unit subdivision. So we have seen that. Saugerties, I think, has seen some of that, and so the regulatory response is to deal with that in a not to say that we shouldn't do it, is to deal with it in a different way, to grant them a density bonus for those units. And if you think about this from a cost perspective, the land costs are about 30% generally of a housing cost. So if you start thinking about what you can do to make the project affordable, you can the extra unit is essentially is a 30% boost in terms of the return on the developer for the cost of the land. And that usually can take care of the difference between affordability, the cost of building, and affordability once you pull the cost of the land out. So there's ways that the city can deal with that. I wouldn't say that developers will love the provision. That's for sure.
Thank you. On a somewhat different topic, the city planning board suggested the right to approve waivers, pretty much with any kind of a vague allowance. They didn't have any specific criteria for when they would grant the waiver. And the county planning board, as you well know, suggested not allowing for these waivers. Or if waivers are allowed, I see you're saying that there should be the consideration of a fee to replace the lost units, so that there would be some kind of contribution. Can you just tell us a little bit more about the reasoning for the more strict no waiver policy that the county suggested?
Well, one of the things I think that we're concerned about is the science behind waivers, or the criteria behind waivers seems to be whatever the developer shows you, rather than essentially a look at the need and the profitability of a project. The thought being is that the planning board would have no standards or criteria relative to issuing a waiver. It was sort of like they would do that. They would do it just based on, well, I don't think I can build it if I need a waiver in order to make this make sense. And even if you look at how IDAs operate or how development corporations operate, there's sort of this test in terms of saying, well, why is it financially infeasible to do that? And then again, if it is financially infeasible to do that, and you're really serious about creating inclusionary housing units, then my sense is what you end up doing is you do it on the basis of density bonuses, or you do it on the basis of what constitutes an affordable unit. And the example I would give you is a recent discussion we had with respect to the town of Lloyd, which has an inclusionary zoning. there was a 200 and some odd lot subdivision the developer was proposing, and there's a 10% inclusion. And the developer kept saying, well, I can't meet that. And if you make us meet that, then we're going to go away. And so the discussion basically said, well, you could build multifamily units, you can build accessory dwelling units. There's all these kinds of things that you could do that essentially could make those units affordable. And the discussion with the developer was, well, that's not what I do. I build $400,000 to $450,000 homes. And that's what I want to build here. I don't want to build accessory dwelling units. I don't want to build multifamily units. I don't want to build smaller units, et cetera, et cetera. And so the town simply said, well, that's the requirement in the statute. There's no provision for waivers. And we think we can provide a means for you to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, then we're not willing to approve it.
Great, thank you.
So they went away? Did they come back?
I don't think developers ever go away. I think they just may change. They may change horses. It's a great project to develop, and it had some potential. It was a difficult discussion to have, and the planning department was asked to come in as part of that discussion because the town really felt that it needed some backup to try to make sure that its inclusionary zoning was followed. And the developers seemed to be pretty adamant that they have a recipe for success, and he wasn't essentially willing to change that. Not that it couldn't be done from a financial standpoint, but that was his recipe. That's what he did. And that's what he was comfortable doing.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other questions? Let's go ahead, Alderman Scott Childress.
Yeah, so Dennis, are there other examples of forms of motivation to get developers to help produce affordable housing that are not inclusionary zoning here in Ulster County? Because I know in New Jersey, they had a different plan where the idea was that developers paid money into a fund that the municipality would use to develop affordable housing through other methods. I'm just wondering if you have an opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is that, and this is something that the county is in the process of doing right now. We have a task force, an advisory committee. The county is in the process of putting together a housing action plan. And looking at the suite of things that that can be done. Part of that is to think of housing, think of your housing, the need for housing and the imperative for housing currently within the county as being commensurate with what communities have done with respect to climate change. So communities have essentially passed a whole host of things that they're doing. There's a suite of things that they do essentially to address climate change, and they become, quote, climate smart communities. And I want you to think about that in terms of what the city can do relative to, one, thinking about itself as a housing smart community and what initiatives it can take. And those initiatives look at what you've done with respect to the land bank, right? And my sense would be is that that's one way you can move forward. And I'm not sure I'm not sure where you are in the land bank now, but I mean, scattered site rehab with respect to the 27 or so properties that the land bank may or may not control, I'm not sure what, but scattered site rehab has been done throughout the state of New York using tax credit financing. That's one of the things that you can use. What the county is proposing with a developer on Golden Hill is tax credits financing. The other thing that you can look at is short-term rental. Think of this as a suite of things that basically improve the housing stock within the community and get more out of the existing housing stock. Accessory dwelling units as of right. Two-family units with no density, with no change in density as of right. There's all kinds of things. If you look at the area in the city that's zoned single-family residential, and you start to think about what those areas could look like if all of a sudden you could get 2 units in those housing units as accessory dwelling units, you can start to think about how to make your housing stock work smarter. And then when you look at development, the idea of granting density bonuses, I mean, to give you a sense of this, the village of New Paltz has density in some of their areas of 32 units per acre in order to encourage some housing development to take place within the village. And they have a fairly sophisticated suite of actions that they use to encourage developers to do there. The other thing is that the idea that Councilman Tollerman floated was essentially to think about affirmatively pushing fair housing, pushing housing development affirmatively within the city by identifying properties and saying this is where we want you to build, and then encouraging that building to take place is one of the things I also think is important, because one of the things that I've seen over the years I've been a planner is back in the 70s, we didn't have the tools available to us to essentially look at a community down to a block level or down to an individual property level. Now with GIS, environmental tools, everything online, the ability to identify these properties and to call them out and to encourage development, I think is an important way that you can say, this is the kind of development you want. And what happens in other communities, they move to something called form-based code, and that was discussed originally in the proposed redoing of the city's code to move to a form-based code system, and it's much more point-oriented and much more outcome-oriented. But I don't know how long it's going to take you to get there, A, and B is, with respect to the proposal that's before you tonight, as well as moving forward, I would urge you to essentially treat this as a crisis like you would treat climate change. You're literally going through a significant change in housing costs, countywide, but also within the city of Kingston. We have, I don't know if you know what a housing choice voucher program is, but essentially what it is that within the county, RUPCO controls about 1,700 units of housing choice vouchers, which essentially can pay a HUD fair market rent, which is about $1,000 a month right now for a single bedroom apartment within the county. There are over 100 people walking around with these vouchers now that literally can't find a place to rent because there's nothing to rent at a HUD fair market rent anymore. And it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And my thought would being is that, whether it's short-term rentals, whether it's your land bank, whether it's a housing trust fund that's established, whether it's inclusionary zoning, whether it's identifying properties that should be upzoned, whether it's looking at making your existing housing stock work harder, all of those things should be on your mind. And I would urge the city to, quite frankly, create, just like you did with respect to whether it's with respect to some of the other stuff that you've done that's been cutting edge relative to climate smart stuff, is to create a housing action plan and make that housing action plan talk back to your zoning statute and your regulatory process as if you really mean it. And for me, that's something that the city needs to think about doing, and it needs to think about doing it not tomorrow, but today. And I can't tell you how important it is to move the inclusionary zoning forward, and to get it on the books. I'll just leave it at that. But I mean, I think it's imperative to that. There's one last thing I want to say, and that has to do with the recommendation that the county put in its response, and that is that one of the biggest concern we have is if you're going to have inclusionary zoning and you're going to talk about affordable units, you ought to know what kind of affordability you're talking about. And so we gave you some numbers in terms of what the median income is in the city, what some of the jobs are paying in the city, and what an 80% at a countywide area median income would result in terms of affordable rent. And you can judge for yourself. We try to give you some guidelines what we thought you should be in terms of the 80% versus other numbers that could be in there. And we tried to give you some guidelines in there so that you have a sophisticated understanding that when you talk about affordability at 80%, what it meant in terms of the rent that comes out on the backside of that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just to thank you, Dennis. That was a lot of great information. I appreciate you being part of this.
And we stand ready to help, both at the county level, from a whole county level, as well as from a county planning department and a county planning board level.
Thank you. I have a question for Corp Counsel Dan Gartenstein. What is the? I know the next step on this is to have a public hearing, and I'm hoping that the public hearing will happen well in advance so that all the questions will be answered by the time the next council meeting, by the time the next laws and rules meeting happens, so that we can have everything we need to vote then. But if we decided to change any of the language that was already forwarded or proposed, does that mean we have to go back and refer it again to the agencies?
It all depends on what you change and how much it impacts the focus and the purpose of the legislation. Clarifying something as simple as setting forth specific numbers rather than percentages, as was requested by the planning board, would not require starting at the beginning. Changing something as basic as the method of calculation or the percentage of required units would certainly require starting at the beginning again and re-referring matters. There have been changes requested by both the planning boards. You have already addressed or at least polled the board with regard to the city planning board request on the waivers, and pretty much unanimously rejected that. The county planning board is requesting that you consider and evaluate what numbers would constitute affordability. You can certainly consider that moving forward without making any substantive change to the proposed legislation and without triggering the need for a new round of referrals. You can also, and our recommendation is moving forward with what has already been adopted, which is with what has already been referred out, with the understanding that issues like affordability and eligibility can always be revisited after the statute is adopted, once we have a better idea of how many developments we're talking about and how the policy and the statute is going to be implemented.
Thank you. Alderwoman Worthington?
Hi, Rita Worthington. Thank you, Dennis, for being here. Appreciate it. And so my question is to Dan Gartenstein, just so I can understand what you're saying. So if we were to change the referral indicating that we wanted less than 10 units, if they were coming in and developing 7 units, and we said they still had to have a percentage of affordable housing, then that would have to go back before the agencies. Is that what I'm hearing? Because my concern is what Dennis said, that, if we say 10, if there's 10 units in a development, developers may say, okay, I'm not going to do 10, I'm going to do 9, I'm going to do 8. And so that's a concern.
Our position would be that if you change it from 10 to lower than 10, that it would trigger another round of referrals, particularly because both entities that reviewed the proposal specifically discussed and addressed that threshold number. So if you were changing that threshold number, our position would be that it would have to go back. I would note, though, that that's the sort of issue that could certainly be revisited in subsequent legislative action if, in fact, it becomes a problem. In addition, it's the sort of issue that would normally be addressed at the planning board level. So if the planning board sees applicants coming in with proposals that are clearly targeted at avoiding the affordable housing requirement, that's going to be obvious, and it's going to be dealt with in site plan review. So Again, you have a developer that comes in and consistently goes right under the threshold. The planning board will address that issue. And if the planning board doesn't address that issue, the council can certainly revisit it.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Scott Childress.
Yeah, I like the direction that Dan Gartenstein is suggesting here, because I think too that some of the items that Dennis mentioned would be really crucial, so that we would go with the idea of no waivers, but have these other options. But it seems like we need to do a little bit of investigation and just make sure we get the language right, and get approvals, because I think basically that's probably the best way to go. And the planning board would then have multiple tools there to use in any of these cases where a developer was concerned about the inclusion of some affordable housing in a development.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Alderwoman Hirsch?
Yes, I was just wondering if we're going to have anyone from the City of Kingston Planning Board come speak to us.
I was just going to mention that for the record, at the same time that I invited, as it was suggested at the last Laws and Rules meeting, at the same time that I invited Dennis, I also invited Mike Gilliard to discuss the city's goals in terms of affordable housing, the executive branch's goals. He responded yesterday that basically all the city's goals were already outlined on the mayor's executive order, so that there was no need for him to attend.
Right. But what I'm saying is we asked for an opinion from the Ulster County Planning Board, and then they're here now, and we asked for an opinion from the City Planning Board. So are we going to have the city also come and speak to us?
I could invite Sue to the next meeting.
If I could just jump in here for a second, and I was also concerned about giving one of the solicited agencies the opportunity to expand upon their comments and not giving the other entities a similar opportunity. I think the distinction here, and I certainly appreciate it being raised, is that the only concern or the comments that the planning board, city planning board have made relate to the waiver. And in essence, this, the council has already determined that they are accepting the comment made by the city planning board, and they are overriding it. So it's really not a matter of them having an opportunity to explain themselves. I think everyone understands what they're asking for, and you've all decided that you're not in support of it. I think inviting the planning board at the next month's meeting is just going to delay this further. This has been pending since April of last year, when the Zoning Board of Appeals asked you to move forward on this, and our office is not in favor of any further delays. If the city planning board was going to speak, that should have happened tonight. We want, our strong recommendation is schedule the public hearing, get the information. If the planning board wants to expand it all on what they said, they certainly can submit something for the day of the public hearing. But this needs to move forward, and I believe that's why the mayor issued the executive order. Under the circumstances, it is an emergency situation.
Absolutely. Segueing into that, I would suggest if anybody has questions or comments that you would like me to seek answers from any of the agencies, please submit them well in advance so that we can have them at the ready to discuss at the next meeting, so that we don't delay the process any further. Alderman Scott Childress.
Yeah, I would agree with what Dan Gartenstein is saying. And I would think, too, that if we learned anything else about waivers, these are things that we can always adjust. They're not, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue to try to revise a law that we've put into place, the one that we've talked about here. So I'm in favor of going full steam ahead.
Okay. And having said that,
Jeffrey, can I just ask one more question of Dan to explain something?
Of course. Go ahead, Alderwoman Hirsch.
Just that, I think even you brought it up, Jeffrey, about how what gives the city the right to make these zoning changes, and I just would like Dan to expand on that.
Yeah, all zoning laws involve to a certain extent the government restricting the use of personal property and the use of private property. The question is whether or not the government's action serves a legitimate government purpose and whether or not it's reasonable under the circumstances. That's what we're doing here. That's what zoning law contemplates. That's what our current zoning code does. So individuals saying that government doesn't have that right are just incorrect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the dates we have available for this public hearing are basically the 2 Thursdays before the next Laws and Rules meeting. So Thursday, January 7th or January 14th, and then the one Monday before. All of us are on different committees, so these were the dates that I identified that don't seem to conflict with anything else. Monday, January 11th, did I say that? And those would be starting at 5:30 for the Thursdays and at 6 for the Monday. So is there any preference?
Either is fine with me.
Either is fine.
Good with me.
So should we say then? Let's see.
I'm happy to go with the earliest one.
Sorry?
I'm happy to go with the earliest date, the 7th, if we think enough people will be, I don't think people are going to be out celebrating January 1st like they usually do. So
Right.
everybody should be.
That's what I was thinking. That gives us enough time if any questions arise to do our research before the meeting.
Yes.
Should we go with January 7th at 5:30? Everybody? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
All right. January 7th at 5:30 p.m. Okay. Thank you, Dennis, again for making time, and thank you for all the information you shared.
Well, and thank you for the committee for the invitation. I would tell you that the planning department stands ready, whether it's on transportation, economic development, or housing, to help the city out and its various committees. So thank you again for the invitation. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Have a good night, guys. Stay safe.
You
Too.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, so that concludes old business. Then we have 3 items on new business.
This conference is no longer being recorded. This conference will now be recorded.
That concludes the old business. So the new business.
Sorry about that.
No worries. We have 3 items on the agenda. They're all relating to the building department, and they were communications submitted by Alderwoman Hirsch. If Michelle, would you like to speak on either issue individually, or are they all?
They all sort of tie together, but they can be found already in our current city code. And they deal with various reports that come from the building department and the building safety officer, zoning enforcement officer, that we're actually not getting any reports. So to the Common Council, there's a report, the duties of the safety officer and our zoning officer reporting to the Common Council at intervals not greater than 3 months. So I don't believe that we've been receiving those. And building construction has 1 time a year, but I think that includes a lot of the duties of the building safety officer and zoning officer. Just think that there's a lot going on in the city right now. And it would be helpful for all of us as council members and representatives of our wards to actually know what's going on with various building issues, help the building department be proactive and be more involved and hands-on, and have a relationship with them. I don't know always what's going on in my ward, and I think it would be helpful to know. So I was looking to see if we could get reports, on a monthly basis. We get updates from various boards and commissions that do apply, like the variance board, zoning variance board, the planning board, and things that will be happening that get reported out. But as far as the building department, we don't know anything.
Alderwoman Worthington? You're still muted, Rita.
I'm sorry, Rita Worthington here. I agree with Alderwoman Hirsch that we should get reports from them. I saw Director Steve Knox's communication, just talking about, how they are overwhelmed. I can imagine that all of the city departments right now are overwhelmed with everything that's going on. But since this is on the code that the Common Council is supposed to receive these quarterly reports, I think that our goal should be enforcing that rather than maybe putting more on them to give them to us monthly. I'm fine. The report that Steve actually sent out was fantastic. And I think that's what we're looking for, something like that. But if we can go ahead and enforce what's already on the books, I think that would serve well for us and for the departments. That way, we don't put more on them. We only put on them what they're already supposed to be doing in the first place. And so that would be my suggestion.
That's a good idea to try that first and see if that makes a difference, and then we can decide if we need it to be more often.
Yeah, I'm also just concerned because the housing report that came out from the Director of Housing Initiatives has down that they're meeting quarterly with the mayor, the building department, the police department, and the fire department, and it completely cuts out the Common Council.
Oh.
So I think that if we can at least get the quarterly reports, it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good start.
I agree. And I think, though, that we do need to be cognizant of the potential necessity for more hours down in building safety. We gave some more hours to the zoning officer, but that's because he was already not able to get to all the sites, and he was having trouble getting all of the work done. Of actually doing the inspecting and evaluating. And so I like the idea of more information, but at the same time, I think we need to be very aware that, if we put on too much of a request at this point, it could end up backfiring and leaving the investigators down there short on the actual investigation work. So I applaud the idea of trying to get information, but I think following this plan of really emphasizing we need to see the quarterly reports and then evaluate from there about the necessity of more frequent ones.
So the next point would be, how do we get those reports, and which committee would they be reported to, or would it be something that's just emailed to us?
It seems like to me it would be public safety. And I would think, an email from you as chair of laws and rules over, giving an overview of what we've just discussed, and then work with the chair of public safety to be sure. I think the other thing is to clarify when exactly those reports should show up, so that instead of saying, has it been 3 months since the last one, if we know that it's supposed to come on June 1st, you can put that in your calendar. No report on June 1st. You got to shoot a communication to the superintendent of building safety. Does that sound feasible?
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, right now the code reads report to, from the safety officer and or zoning officer, report to common council at intervals not greater than 3 months, so.
Dan Garnstein?
Yeah, I think the real issue here is what you want in a report and what you're looking for, because a report can accomplish a whole lot of different things. Our office certainly would be concerned about any unproven or pending allegations being publicly discussed or revealed in any way without court action and findings. Certainly basic statistics can be collated and forwarded to the council through Municity. So the real question is what you need or what you're looking for, what is privileged and what can be disclosed, and what is the easiest way to collect that information. And if you can, articulate what you're looking for, certainly Kyle McIntosh can advise us as to whether or not it's a simple Excel spreadsheet that he just needs to take off Municity. Or Steve Knox can tell you whether he can just give you statistics. Specifics about open investigations that may end up leading to court proceedings, we are never going to endorse discussing publicly or disclosing in a manner that's going to compromise either the investigation or the court proceedings.
Right, so I would be happy to go through what is included in the code at this time, and speak to the building department and then your office, Dan.
We can certainly do that, and we can clarify what the expectations would be for a report and what it actually would entail to put that together. And there's a distinct possibility that IT can prepare that with minimal effort, just so that you all know the numbers that are pending and trends in terms of enforcement without getting into individual cases that are still subject to investigation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Jeffrey, Patrick O'Reilly.
Yes, go ahead, Patrick.
Steve basically, took on this job not long ago, and some of these things were in place before he got there. I think we really need to take a look at and really include him in, molding, what we need down there. So what I'm saying is I don't think we just should say, hey, just give us a report. I think we need to talk to Steve, have him tell us exactly what he can do, and then go from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick, I have reached out to him, and it is in the code. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're getting information that we, should be getting. So I'm not trying to give them more work. I'm actually trying to help that department actually be partners with all of us and help them identify things. There used to be programs in the city called Block by Block, where older people could go out and be with the building department, see what's going on in the ward. So I'm just feeling like it needs to be, a partnership. We know our wards. We work with our constituents. We know what's going on. So.
I appreciate that, Michelle. I really do. I really appreciate the fact that, when things are running right, it just feels better between everyone. And we should know what's going on down there a little better. Thank you very much for bringing it up.
Thank you.
Okay, so it seems like Michelle and I have some homework to do on this. We'll touch base during the week, I guess, Michelle.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I guess that if there's no more discussion, that concludes everything we had on the agenda. So is there any other discussion? Alderman Scott Childress? Oh, your motion.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? Second by Rita Worthington. All in favor?
I'm not allowed to vote.
For joining?
Yes, yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and stay safe. And if I don't see you or talk to you before the holidays, happy holidays.
Good night,
Same
all.
to you, Jeffrey. Good night, everybody.
Dan, thank you, Dan.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Night.
Good night, Elisa. Thank you so much.
you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.